Welcome back to Lit Vibes Only, where we lit the shit out of books we love and hate. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Kelsey. And that is my cue for
Every
the
time.
next.
Every time.
I don't know why. I'm
Our
just like, yeah, I'm
800th
Kelsey.
episode, and this is still going to be happening.
I'm Kelsey. I don't have to do anything else.
We're just glad you're here.
Okay, so welcome to Lit Vibes Only. You can find us on our socials. Come interact with us. We want you to. We
Yes,
have fun out
please.
there. So find us on Instagram at litvibesonly_podcast
Mhm. Yep.
and on TikTok at Lit Vibes Only Podcast and on YouTube at the same
Handle.
Thank you. I was like,
What do we call that thing?
I was really trying.
I could see
At
you
the
thinking
handle.
so hard.
God, I do so well here.
It's so funny. I feel like this has become like our thing though. Like it's
all right.
It's what our listeners expect at this point. It's our thing. It's okay.
Find us on those socials. We want to interact with you. We want to engage with you. The other thing is this episode comes out the second Monday in December.
Mm-hmm.
And that means you only have 5 days left if you're listening on Monday to give us a rating and review on Apple or Spotify or any other major podcast platform to get a sticker, a once in a lifetime opportunity.
Get on it.
To get your Lit Vibes Only first edition, never before seen in your house.
In your mailbox. I think that's on your water bottle.
Because obviously they have been seen. We've been plastering them all over social media. Go get your sticker. All you have to do is rate us and leave a review. Go do that and get your sticker.
Great. And then how are they going to get that sticker, Kelsey?
I just told them. What are you talking about?
Okay. Just to be clear.
Final note. Fine, Amanda. Gotta be clear.
Gotta give instructions. We're educators here.
Also, when you send us that review, a screenshot of that review, you also need to send us where to send your sticker, your address that you want us to send it to. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Very
That's
important.
Final note that I almost always forget. So,
yes.
So excited for you to get your stickers. We are going to be done giving them away December 13th.
That's it.
So you're not going to have another chance to get one.
Exactly.
So get it now. Get it now.
And also, if you listen to our podcast but are not on socials, because I know that applies to some folks, you can send us your screenshot via email. So litvibesonlypodcast@gmail.com will do the trick just fine. Send that screenshot, send your address, and you will also get your lovely sticker. So
yeah,
we are making sure we're reaching everyone. Yeah. Ugh. God, I'm so tired.
You had a long couple of days. Did you?
Well, a couple of days, but I just feel like, yeah, my weekends this fall have just been so jam-packed. Sometimes with fun stuff, like stuff that I'm choosing to do with friends, but also just like a lot of work stuff with like tournaments and open houses and like traveling for conferences. Like I can't remember at this point the last time I've had like a 2-day weekend fully to myself. To like rot on the couch, and I really need that. I need that in my life.
I know. I'm actually heading out. We're recording in November, which we tend to do is like a month in advance almost. And I am about to head out on another conference, and I'm going to Santa Fe, which I'm excited about. And I'm also going to Meow Wolf. If anybody knows what that is, like I am so excited.
This will be your third one. I didn't realize. Yeah, we went to one together in where was it? In Las
Vegas. Yes. So then I'll go to this one, and then the only one left I have is in Dallas Fort Worth, and I'm like, when am I really gonna go there? I don't know. Maybe I'll find a conference there.
There you go.
But yeah, so I'm tired because I went to. Like these are fun, great things, but like I went to the Eras Tour, right, in New Orleans. I was supposed to go see Shakira this last weekend.
Yeah, what happened?
And she canceled her
shows.
And then I bought my outfit already. And like there's like no returns on some of the things. And I'm like, great. when am I ever going to wear these tight black leather pants?
We're just gonna
I
go
don't
out on the town,
know.
Kelsey. We're just gonna
Next
have a night out.
Halloween, maybe. Like, I don't get it. So, and then before that, in October, I was in Chicago as well. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I've been traveling a lot.
Yeah.
And so I'm not only going to Santa Fe though, I'm also going to Mexico
Oh
for
my
the first
gosh.
time ever.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um, for
That's so
my
fun.
friend's wedding, which I'm
You're gonna
really
have a great
excited
time.
for, but I'm just going to be there and back and I'm going to be so tired.
Yeah. How long are you
Um,
there for? Like, is it just
Literally like 3 days, like, but
okay?
one
Yeah.
full day.
Oh my gosh, that's a
Yeah.
really fast turnaround.
Yeah.
And also that makes me sad because Mexico is so
Uh,
cool and that doesn't give you a lot of time to explore. But you'll just have to go
my,
back.
yeah, my husband and I want to go to Mexico City in February on my
Mm-hmm.
winter break.
Yeah.
So we're probably going to do that and like
Okay.
actually explore. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, we do student trips at our school, and one of the international trips this year is to Mexico City, which is very cool. I
Oh,
know.
are you going?
No, I'm doing the Tanzania trip. So I
Oh,
will
that's
be
right.
taking kids to Tanzania in the summer,
Mhm.
but I'm like, oh, I want to go to Mexico City. Sounds
I don't know.
amazing.
Like with children, it makes it very, very different.
It does. And it does. It for sure
Yeah.
does. But this will be my fourth time leading an international trip with students, and
Uh-huh.
I really enjoy it. And it is a different experience, but you still get to experience a lot while you're there.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm usually at minimum doing a week in these places. Like Tanzania
Mm-hmm.
will be there for 2 weeks. So it
Wow.
is a different experience, but you all, still, getting to
You get
learn
to
and see a lot.
experience like
Yeah.
everything that the kids are set to
Yeah.
experience, which is
Exactly.
typically like cultural events and like
Yeah.
museums
Yep.
and yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense. You just have to herd however many
Yeah.
children you have, and that's not the fun part.
That is true, but generally it's not a huge group. It's usually like 9 to 15 students, at least the ones that I've
Okay.
done. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not, 25 or 30 kids that you're like trying to corral. So
Yeah.
it's very manageable. And there's like for the Tanzania trip, there's 9 kids and there's 3 adults going. So it's very
Oh,
easy to like,
nice.
yeah, yeah, very easy to split up responsibilities
You're
and
like, I've
things.
got my three. Y'all are
Exactly.
responsible for those.
Yeah. So it's not a huge lift, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool.
What have you been? Because I feel like we didn't do this for our Akatar episode, but
My gosh, I know.
I
I
know
was too
huge. Oh,
excited for
we
Akatar.
were so excited to jump in. We just like forgot to talk about the books we're reading. So Kelsey,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
what
just
are you
also want
currently
to preface
into?
this
Oh
with
yeah, yeah.
like, I've been struggling, you guys. Like, I've been telling Amanda, like, also on a personal level, just been
Mm-hmm.
struggling in general. But really, the stress of my job is very
Mm-hmm.
high right now.
Yeah.
And I am feeling very overwhelmed by just the tasks that I need to do at work. And so I don't come home and read like I had been a month or so ago. And so that's been hard for me. And so I've been in a
Yeah.
slight reading slump. I tried to start The Witch Collector and I got a few chapters in it and it didn't sustain me. Like
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel like I wanted to continue it at the moment. So, you know what is going to help me?
What's gonna help you?
A
Tell us.
romance book, a silly romance book.
Yes.
And so I've been waiting to get into this one. This one's by Danica Nava, and it's called The Truth According to Ember. And
Mm,
it's an Indigenous author
love
with
it.
two Indigenous characters that fall in love, obviously. And we'll see where it goes. We'll see if I like it.
Yeah. So have you started or you're about to start?
I started it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Just in like the first little bit. Yeah. Still.
Yeah, that's
Hmm.
great. And even though this is coming out in December, we're currently in November, which is Native American Heritage Month. So that's
Oh,
also
yeah.
like
See?
a perfect read. It's funny whenever we do these, I feel like I've always either just finished a book or I'm about to start another one, which is where I am right now. So I just finished All the Sinners Bleed. You can't really see because my
Yeah.
ring light is reflecting.
S.A. Cosby.
Yeah, so it's by S.A. Cosby. This is my first time reading a book written by them. He is
Okay.
a Black male author, and it is a thriller slash like crime fiction.
Mm,
And I gave it 5 stars. I
okay.
thought as a thriller, it did its thing, but
Uh-huh.
so it takes place in the South in, I think like, God, 2018 or something. And it follows this newly elected Black sheriff who is investigating serial killer.
Uh-huh.
and trying to figure out what's going on. And so it also dives into like the history of racism in the South and the way that it continues to kind of rear its ugly head in different ways and manifestations in the 21st century, and how folks are continuing to deal with and contend with and heal from that history, and the ways in which some folks aren't and are continuing to celebrate
Mm.
it, and the tensions that it creates. So it was a great thriller. It's a little gory at parts, so I will give that trigger
Mm.
warning for folks. It
Yeah.
does get violent and the manner in which folks are killed, but I appreciated it for diving into that particular like social commentary. I thought that was really well done. So I will have to like, I don't know what else he's written, but I'm like, now I need to find out more because I really enjoyed it. So for my thriller folks, I highly recommend All the Sinners Bleed. And if you read it, let me know what you think because I'd love to chat about it.
Cool.
Yeah. So we are doing our December Lit Rex episode.
Mm-hmm.
And since there's not a Heritage Month or heritage associated with the month of December, Kelsey and I decided
Mm-hmm.
that we would use this month to celebrate and highlight immigrant stories. So the
Mm-hmm.
books that we've chosen for you today are books that tell the stories of the experiences of people who have come to the United States from other countries and what it's like acclimating to life in the United States, the tensions that can arise around trying to stay true to your culture and heritage, while also trying to be seen as an equal American citizen among folks who might perceive you as other and different and therefore consider you in many ways a second class citizen. The
Mm-hmm.
tension between tradition and then the ways in which individuals might choose different paths as they embark on a
Mm-hmm.
life in a new country. And so that tension often between first gen folks and their parents who are the ones who immigrated. And so a lot of those themes come up in these books. And so, yeah, we wanted
Mm-hmm.
to provide a space to share these stories since there wasn't necessarily a particular month associated with that. And because of that, a lot of these stories connect to multiple heritages, which you'll see as we dive in. So I've got two books.
Totally.
Kelsey's got two books. And I think this month we have read all of the books that we've recommended. Like you've read both of your books.
Yeah.
I read both of my books. Sometimes we recommend books
Mm-hmm.
that we haven't yet read but are planning to.
Right.
But these are ones that we've all read and really enjoyed and hope that you feel similarly. So, Kelsey, do you want to kick things off with your first recommendation?
You're not going to know this, but this is take like 500 for me, Kelsey. On my first recommendation, which is Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson. And to jump things off, I want to talk about Charmaine a little bit. Black Cake was actually her first debut novel in 2022. And she actually has two other books, one that was released in 2023 and one that's upcoming in this next year. So maybe Amanda and I will read it together.
Yeah.
She was born in New York, but she is Jamaican American. And because of Black Cake, she has been on the New York Times bestseller list. So that's exciting.
Yeah. Go
And
Charmaine.
I saw in different places too that I think she lives in Italy now.
Yeah, I saw that as well. Yeah.
It feels random, but I'm sure there's like some reason for it. But like also
Mhm.
as an author, like you could literally live anywhere, right?
Yeah.
And just
Work
like
from home.
exactly. So why not Italy?
Exactly.
So more about Black Cake. Like I said, it was published in 2022 and it was her first novel. It's really interesting, like the genres that it gets placed in, because obviously it's fiction. It
Mm-hmm.
also has like a mystery vibe to it, but it
Mm-hmm.
also gets placed in historical fiction, which is weird that
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm. Recommending historical fiction.
recommending this
Look at that. Look
story.
at the ways that we're coming
Um,
together on this
so
podcast.
funny because the book itself is about and around this one character who is at the beginning you find out is a mother of these two children, and she brings them together after she has died, left them a recording of her life story,
Mhm.
and proceeds to tell her children like the truth of her life. And she made them a black cake to share at the end of the story. And so all of these things kind of go into her own history as a Jamaican immigrant to the
Mm-hmm.
United States. And so
Mm-hmm.
in the very beginning, you find out like they are in the United States, and she starts telling this story. You don't really know what it's about, but it's about this little girl who is from Jamaica. So you hear the story from like the first perspective, first person of the mother, and like her experience of not just immigrating, but also her challenges that she faced like throughout her life to get to that point, where she had this beautiful life that she enjoyed in the United States with her children and her husband. But there is a very complicated history from her background. And then also, beautifully at the end, like the children end up returning to Jamaica, where her mom initially like began her life, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so it's a beautiful, like, kind of full circle story. What else do I want to say about it? It has a 4.09 rating on Goodreads.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and it was nominated for both readers' favorite historical fiction and readers' favorite debut novel.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I think that's all I need to say about. Oh, the last thing is that
Mm-hmm.
it was made into a TV
Yeah.
show adaptation where Mia Isaac plays Covey.
Yeah. It was on or it's on Hulu, I think.
Yeah, Hulu.
Yeah, I haven't seen it,
Me
but
neither, but I'm
yeah.
curious about it.
Yeah, because I read the book and I was like, oh, should I watch this? Yeah, it's interesting because I think you mentioned the different genres. And I think overall it's
Uh-huh.
probably considered contemporary fiction, but it does have elements
Yeah.
of all of those other things
Yeah, yeah,
with the
yeah.
mystery and the historical fiction as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, both Kelsey and I have read this book and clearly enjoyed it. And yeah, I would second Kelsey's recommendation for sure. Okay. So my first recommendation is A Woman Is No Man by Etaf Rum or Rum. Should
Mm.
have looked up her name. I actually have the book here. And this was a book that, once again, I read with my book club a couple of years ago. And we were excited to read this book because, again, we do really focus on female authors in my book club, and we're always looking to read stories that are new to us and experiences that are new to us. And that was what drew us to it. So, a little bit about Etaf. She is Palestinian American, and she is a novelist and a New York Times best-selling author. And she was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, by immigrant parents who they grew up in refugee camps in Palestine before then immigrating to the United States with her family. Etaf comes from a huge family. She's actually the oldest of 9 children. And when she was, I believe, 19, she was forced into an arranged marriage and had children pretty soon after that. So she was, very much raised in a traditional home. But in spite of that, she wanted her education. And so she found a way to earn both her bachelor's and her master's in American and British literature from NC State University, and then obviously went on to become an author. And one of the things that propelled her into writing this book, which was her debut novel, was even though there are like a fair amount of books written about the Arab American experience, she realized that a lot of them were lacking the female perspective. And so she wanted
Mm.
to kind of fill that hole in the market with the first of her books, which is A Woman Is No Man. And then she also wrote after that Evil Eye, which I have not read, but that was
Mm.
published in 2023 and was actually named an NPR Best Book of the Year. So that's great. So definitely, again, an awarded author. A Woman Is No Man. This was published in 2019, so really recent, and it's about 339 pages. So again, I think pretty accessible for most folks. Also is another 4-star rating on Goodreads, 4.26 to be
Mhm.
specific. And it's won a bunch of awards. So it was nominated for the Arab American Book Award for fiction. It was nominated for the Goodreads Choice Awards for fiction and debut novel. It was nominated for the Book of the Month, Book of the Year Award. And it was also a New York Times Book Review Editor's Choice. So clearly, a lot of folks think very highly of this book, in addition
Mhm.
to me. The book is kind of partially autobiographical because she's definitely incorporating a lot of her own experiences as a Palestinian American and as a young woman who lived um, a life similar to some of the characters in the book. It is a book that has two different timelines through it. So one of them follows Isra's timeline. It's in the 1990s. She's a young woman living in Palestine who ends up getting married off to a much older man named Adam. And Adam currently lives in the United States in New York. And so she's essentially sent off to marry him. And Isra
Mm,
is one of those like plucky young women who like wants to get educated and is very curious about the world. And instead, she ends up in this really toxic, abusive relationship and, is just expected to cook and clean and bear children. And both her husband and her mother-in-law, who lives with them, are very verbally and physically abusive towards her. And
mm,
so she has a really difficult life. And then the second timeline follows her daughter, Dea, who, and this
mm,
timeline takes place in 2008. She is like, on the cusp of finishing up high school and heading off into the world. And she wants to go to college. Like she wants her education. At this point in the story, Isra and her husband, so her parents, are gone. They were killed in a car crash. And you have to read more in the story to find out exactly what happened there. But she was
mm.
told they died in a car crash. So she was raised by her grandparents. They're obviously very traditional and they're expecting her to just have an arranged marriage similar to her mother. And she's very much against that. And so it follows those two separate timelines. And we see the different ways in both Isra and Dea are like working to overcome these barriers that have been placed in their path by these traditional expectations. One of the struggles with this book and one of the struggles that Etaf faced when she was writing it
Mm,
is she was worried that the book was going to come across as like anti-Arab or like anti-Palestinian because she does
mm,
talk about, a lot of the struggles that some women can face in more traditional households or more extremist households. And she was worried that essentially, especially since this book was published in the United States and
mm.
getting widely dispersed to American audiences, that
Yeah.
it was just going to confirm, right, a lot of the stereotypes that some Americans might already have about folks in the Arab community. So she wanted to make it really clear, like the relationships in this book and the kind of the problematic things that are happening are only representative of like really traditionalist and really kind of extremist views in relation to things like Islam and Palestinian culture. And she very much wants to make sure that folks aren't coming away with this idea like, okay, this is just how it is for everyone and how awful. So she wanted to make it really clear like it's not an attack on either Palestine or Islam. And yeah, I'm glad that she felt brave enough to write this book because it could not have been easy. And she herself has been
Mhm,
ostracized from her community and like her family because she chose, to go to college and to write this book.
mhm.
And I think there's a quote actually because I have the book in front of me, and she writes, "Where I come from, we keep these stories to ourselves. To tell them to the outside world is unheard of, dangerous, the ultimate shame." And so it really did take a
Mm,
lot of bravery on her part to share her story with the world. And I think she does it really well and still provides a lot of, I think, grace to folks who, still might embrace, like I said, more traditional or extremist views. And she like sees the way in which traditional extremist interpretations of like Islam, for example, can lead to folks behaving in ways that are actually not encouraged or endorsed by their sacred
mhm.
texts. And we see that in other religions too. Like you can see in Christianity where folks are taking things in like the Bible or in sacred texts and be like, I think this is what this
Right.
means. So anyhow,
Mhm.
I thought she did a really good job of presenting that. We really enjoyed it. It provided a lot of food for thought. And the last thing I'll say is that, and we've mentioned this before in Litrex episodes, like this is just one story. So taking this book and being like, oh, this is how every single
Right.
Palestinian American family runs is inaccurate and harmful. This is just one experience, which is valid and needs to be told, but it
Right.
is not, you know, the experience of all and shouldn't be applied broadly. So yeah, that's my first book.
Wow, cool. Thank you for sharing. My second nomination, book recommendation, also comes from the Arab world, from Afghanistan. And so this is Khaled Hosseini, the author. He wrote The Kite Runner. He was
Mm-hmm.
actually born in Afghanistan, in Kabul,
Mm-hmm.
and he's an immigrant himself, which is often the case, right? When people are writing stories
Mm-hmm.
of immigrants, right? Or whatever story it is, like they often relate to it in some way. And in this case, he is an immigrant himself. His family moved to San Jose in the 80s, the very early 80s. And he actually grew up to be a medical doctor and was practicing for 10 years before he released his first novel, which
Oh,
was
okay.
The Kite Runner.
Mm-hmm.
And he now, or at least I think now is a goodwill envoy for the
Mm-hmm.
United Nations Commissioner for Refugees. And
Wow.
so now he's like working in that like line of work to support refugees and immigrants. And he has a foundation where he provides humanitarian aid to Afghanistan, like to this
Wow.
day. And so
Yeah.
that was just interesting. I wanted to like put that out there. And The Kite Runner was published in 2003. So it was like, think about the political like
Mm-hmm.
state of things. That was 2
Mm-hmm.
years after 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so I just want to preface that this book came out at a really pivotal point in the United
Mm-hmm.
States
Mm-hmm.
understanding of the
Yeah.
Arab world and community. And so it was not a good outlook back then, right? And so that's just something to keep in mind when this book came out.
Yeah.
But it was still very popular back then. And now it's still definitely a book I see like talked about. The book, it's not just based on like an immigrant story, but it's also this story of redemption as well
Mm-hmm.
for the main character. Amir
Mm-hmm.
is friends with this young boy, and I forget the other boy's name,
Mm-hmm.
Hassara or something. So these two boys, they are young friends, and Amir is a kite runner, which it was a big deal to be a kite runner. And his friend was his like assistant essentially
Mm-hmm.
to being a kite runner. And so they were just like good friends. And then something tragic happens to the side character
Mm-hmm.
that fills the main character with a ton of guilt and shame, and they end up kind of splitting apart because of these emotions. I don't think like the young character either characters has like the ability to process them, and that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of that's outlined in the book. And then war breaks out, and honestly I can't speak well to the war itself
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or the overthrow of the government, but I do believe that it's the Russian government that came over. And so then one family, Amir's family, ends up moving to the United States, and his friend has to stay in Afghanistan. And
Mm-hmm.
eventually the main character does come back to Afghanistan and has this story of essentially redemption around like the difficult events that took place when they were children. And so I did really enjoy this book when I read it. And it's been a long time. It's been out since 2003, like I said. It's been a long time since I've read it. And I will say there is criticism about the book. And I wonder too if it's from when it was actually published, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was a difficult time for the Arab community in the United States. And I'm curious about that. But there is criticism around kind of putting the US on more of a pedestal in the book, and rather
Mm-hmm.
than telling a beautiful story about Arab folks from
Mm-hmm.
Afghanistan or people from Afghanistan, right? And so I definitely think there is like a mixture of that, but
Mm-hmm.
that's what people criticize the book for, is kind of the political leanings of the overall theme of the book. And so
Mm-hmm.
I just want to throw that out there. If you read it and you're like, oh my God,
Yeah.
Kelsey recommended this like
Mm.
crazy
Yeah.
book. And a lot of stories that we recommend, it's not just like nothing is ever black and white,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And just even thinking back to Trail of Lightning,
Mm-hmm. Oh
kind
yeah.
of going back
Yeah.
to that, right? There was
Yeah.
still controversy around that book. Doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean that wasn't a story to uplift and
Right.
talk about. But yeah, so just keeping that in mind that it was or has been seen to be a bit controversial for some folks. And so I just want to keep that caveat in there. And
Yeah.
the other thing too about this book, it was also made into a movie.
Mm.
So there is that as well. I have not seen it. I think when I read this book, I was very moved by it, but I was emotionally impacted heavily by the tragic event that impacts the young boy at the
Mm-hmm.
near the beginning of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And so I will say there is also a content warning for sexual assault. And so that is in this book, and it is like a heavy emotional theme throughout the book. So keeping that in mind, whether or not you pick that up for
Okay.
those two
Yeah.
things.
Thanks for letting us
uh,
know about that. One of the things I wanted to mention as you were talking about kind of the controversy around the book and like that it
mm-hmm,
might seem a bit maybe pro-American in some of its leanings and rhetoric. I
mm-hmm,
think that is at the crux of a lot of immigrant experiences in that there's this tension between like coming to America and the potential benefits and opportunities that coming here can bring, depending on
sure.
where you're coming from and
Mm-hmm,
what your situation is, while at the same time wrestling with all of the potentially negative impacts that can come from also immigrating to the United States. And I
mm-hmm,
think that comes up for probably most, if not all, folks who immigrate here. It's like, yes, on the one hand, we can see what America has to offer us. And at the same time, there are also so many ways that we as individuals or our culture, et cetera, can be impacted by making that transition to a new country.
mm-hmm.
So I'm glad you highlighted that. All right. So my final
Ah.
recommendation is Dear America, Notes of an Undocumented Citizen, written by Antonio, I'm sorry, Vargas.
Oh.
And when I was looking up a little bit about Vargas, I was quickly overwhelmed with just all of the stuff that he's accomplished and all of the things he's involved in. So I'm just going to
Uh-huh.
give like a pretty brief overview of who he is and what he's gotten up to, but definitely encourage you to hop online and do some of your own research because he really does all the things. So he was born in the Philippines. So he's not first gen. He himself immigrated here and was sent to live with his grandparents here in the United States when he was 12. And Dear America is a memoir. And so it tells the story
Mm,
of the fact that when he got here, he never got authorization to stay permanently and therefore became an undocumented immigrant, which we'll get to in a second. He obviously grew up here and went on to accomplish great things. As of right now, he is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. He is an Emmy nominated filmmaker and a
mm.
Tony nominated theatrical producer.
Very different
Um,
worlds.
but yeah, yeah. So he literally kind of has his hands in everything. He also, I think I read that he either co-founded or is somehow involved with like a sneaker line, like a shoe line that he's a part of. He has
Okay.
founded a nonprofit called Define America, which is like an immigrant storytelling organization.
Mm,
So he really has just done so much in terms of his writing and the things that he's produced. So he wrote Dear America, obviously, and then he is in the process of writing and publishing a book also coming out next year, 2025,
mm.
which is White is Not a Country, which sounds compelling just from the title, and I will probably have to check it out.
Yeah.
So he has two books in the works, or one book in the work, one book that's been published. And then he's also, like I mentioned before, so he wrote or produced, I'm sorry, and directed a documentary, a feature film called
Oh.
Documented about the undocumented experience of a lot of immigrants to our country.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have heard of this play, but I haven't seen it. The play that he was Tony nominated for was What the
Mm-hmm.
Constitution Means to Me. And he was one of the people who produced it. So I thought that was very cool, especially as a
Okay.
theater person. I was like, oh my gosh. So yeah, again, just like an insanely accomplished, well-rounded individual. So his book, Dear America, was published in 2018. It's a shorter book, only 256 pages, and another above 4-star rating on Goodreads, 4.3. So all of the books we've recommended today, I think all of them are 4
I
stars.
actually don't think
Oh,
I
for Black
added
Cake.
in.
For
No,
Black
Black
Cake.
Cake was,
I
but
was. Oh, for Kite Runner.
I'll just look it
Yeah.
up in just a
All right. You
second.
can look it up while I'm continuing. So yeah, and so it's a memoir. So it's telling the story of essentially what it was like for him living here illegally. Oh, it also okay. So Black Cake also has
No,
4.3.
Kite Runner. Kite Runner.
Oh,
It
Kite Runner.
was
Sorry. Yeah.
4.3. Yeah.
4.3. Okay, so the same as Dare America. So yeah, these are all like 4 stars and above, folks. So we're
Nice.
recommending quality things.
Good.
That's like good shit. Okay.
Uh,
So yeah, it tells his story of what it was like living here as an undocumented immigrant. He came here when he was 12, but didn't find
mhm.
out until he was 16 that he was living here illegally. And he found out because he had gone to get his driver's license in California. That's where he was living.
Mhm.
And when he tried to use the paperwork that he had to get his driver's license, they were like, yeah, this isn't real. So that's when
Wow.
he found out. And obviously, it was very shocking for him and upsetting. And the rest of the memoir kind of talks about what his life was like after that realization. He ended up getting introduced to journalism and involved in journalism based on an English teacher that he had in high school. And that's what really kicked off his career in writing. And then, of course, he's gone on to be a huge advocate and activist for immigrants in the United States. And I do have a quote
Hmm.
from him that I'm going to share because I think it really
Okay.
kind of sums up a bit about the book and what it means. So, this is a quote from Vargas, and it says, "This is not a book about the politics of immigration. This book, at its core, is not about immigration at all. At all. This book is about homelessness, not in a traditional sense, but in the unsettled, unmoored psychological state that undocumented immigrants like myself find ourselves in. This book is about lying and being forced to lie to get by, about passing as an American and as a contributing citizen, about families, keeping them together and having to make new ones when you can't. This book is about constantly hiding from the government and, in the process, hiding from ourselves. This book is about what it means to not have a home." And I don't know, I think, he summed it up much better than I
Mhm.
ever could, which is why I wanted to share that. And I think it does touch on one of those big overarching themes that I think probably touched on the lives of a lot of immigrants, which is, where do I belong? And
Mhm.
what is my true home? Because you are existing in this in between space where technically you've come to live here and America is now your home, but
Yeah.
also home is another country. And you often have a lot of
Mhm.
relatives and families still living there. And yeah,
Right.
that sense of displacement. And I think he sums that up really beautifully. And so yeah, the memoir really just dives into all of those things that I just mentioned. Again, it's incredibly well written. He clearly is a skilled writer and has had a lot of experience in the field. And
Mhm.
I still think about this book sometimes. And one of the ways I think about it, this is going to sound like a tangent, but I promise it's not. So I am a speedy driver. I don't like going slow. And I'm like a safe driver, but I never go just the speed limit. I'm always at least
Sure.
5 or 10 over, maybe sometimes more. And in the book, he tells this story because he is an undocumented immigrant. And if he gets pulled over
Right.
while driving and they're like checking his documents, so he ends up getting kind of fake documents like forged and things like that to get by.
Mhm.
And he's like, if I get pulled over and they have to run my license, etc., they're going to find out that I'm here illegally and I could get deported. And so
Mhm.
whenever he's driving, he's like super cautious, like is always going exactly the speed limit, like,
Mhm.
everything is by the book. And so whenever I am like out driving and I'm like behind someone who's really slow and I'm getting frustrated, I'm like, Amanda, stop for a second. You don't know what their story is. You don't know, what's going on with them. And I often think
Yeah.
about that particular incident from the book
Mhm.
before I'm like ready to just be like, "Ah, get out of my way." I'm like, you don't know. Maybe like this could be
Yeah.
someone who literally can't afford to go over the speed limit because it could be a matter of staying in this country or getting deported. But all that to
Good
say,
point.
great book. And it really opened my eyes to an entire population of folks here in our country that
Mhm.
often get overlooked or dismissed or demonized, right? Depending on who you're talking to or listening to.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I highly encourage folks to check out this book and learn a bit more about the undocumented experience in this country.
Yeah. I have a question.
Yeah.
You put in your notes, he's the most famous undocumented immigrant in
Hmm.
America. What did
I
that
did.
mean?
So basically, it's exactly what it sounds like because he is such a huge figure now and is so well known. That's the moniker he has. And the reason why it's kind of tongue in cheek is because generally, if you're undocumented, you don't want people to know who you
Right.
are, right? You want to fly under the radar. You want to stay far away from, ICE and other organizations. And so it is surprising that he ended up in a position that's so visible when it could have resulted in him getting deported.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So he
I
was
also
well known before
no
while he was still
no.
undocumented?
Well, he was well known when the book came out. So that was the thing. I remember looking this up after I had read the book. I think when he wrote the book, the understanding was that he could stay here, but if he leaves to go home to like visit his mom in the Philippines, like he can't come back. I think. And again, I apologize if someone has read this book more recently than I did and was like, no, that's not the case. But yeah, he's in a very strange place in terms of his status. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It also made me think a little bit about Lobisona, right? Which is also an immigrant story. And
which I was like, dang, I could
yeah, you could have. Yeah. And it really ties into that constant threat when you're living here as an undocumented immigrant. Like any moment I could be found out, and like that just constant stress and fear. Yeah.
Kind of caveat. I wanted to say, because you just said it, but just highlight it again, is that if we're ever wrong about something, always feel free to tell us.
Yes, please.
We love that back and forth. And if we're learning something, that's totally the point of what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Right. So we appreciate that. It's not harmful or attacking in any way. I suppose depending on how you do it, but yes,
how you phrase it.
Just let us know. And we're definitely open to that feedback is what I'm saying.
I love that. Yeah. Like we are not experts by any means. And we are, as educators, I know this might not be true for all educators, but for us, like we are here to like learn and grow. And so if we have gotten something wrong, even if it's for something that's maybe less serious, like, oh, you got this character's name wrong or plot point, like tell us. In summary, my 2 book recommendations were A Woman Is No Man by Etaf Rum.
Oh gosh.
And Dear America, Notes of an Undocumented Citizen by Antonia Vargas.
And mine were Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson and The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini.
Yes.
I think that's what it was.
Hosseini.
Yes. Okay. I practice. I promise.
She did. I can vouch for her. Some of these names just throw us sometimes. Okay. So if you have read these books and want to share your thoughts, if you are going to read them, let us know.
Definitely let us know.
Yeah, we really want to engage in further conversations around these. And Kelsey mentioned them at the beginning of the episode, but as a reminder, you can engage in conversation with us on our socials. So Instagram at @litvibes_only_podcast and TikTok at @litvibes_only_podcast. You can also check out videos of these episodes at @litvibes_only_podcast on YouTube. But please comment, please share your own recommendations for books that are about immigrant stories and that celebrate immigrant authors. We're happy to share listener recs. We've done that already and we want to do it again. So let us know books that you've read that are great, that also tie into our quote unquote heritage this month. And
so we've made up.
That we made up. And then again, final plug, you've got 5 days, use them wisely, write that review. Rate us on sticker. One of those major podcast platforms and get your sticker.
Send us your address.
Yeah, this is it. It's going to be so sad that you're not one of the really cool,
the one and only
folks who are sporting their amazing sticker. Alrighty, that is all for us. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you next Monday.
Bye.